I want to bring in the group chat now. We have got Jamil Jaffer, founder and executive director at the National Security Institute, Alexander Ward, national security reporter with the Wall Street Journal, and Jennifer Gavito, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Iran in public policy. So I wanted to talk to you guys. We have a state of play on the battlefield, so to speak, and I want to get a sense from you about how the president is talking about this at home, because he was just speaking recently at a retreat last night. So first, we've been hearing different reasons. Now we're hearing kind of mixed messaging on what has been accomplished so far. The president saying, I think the war is very complete, pretty much. And then if you check the social media for DOD, they say no mercy, and we have only just begun to fight internet caps. So you have worked at DOD. Can you talk about the split screen here between the active fighting, this thing is still going on, possibly in another phase, and the president already coming out and speaking in terms of victory?
In my view, this really is reflective of the fact that we don't yet know what the overall objective is. I think it's fair for the president to say that many of the operational objectives have in fact been met. Certainly degradation of the missile program and of the naval fleet. But if you go back to statements over the last few days looking for total surrender, ongoing discussion about regime collapse, then that is still a long way off. And so until the administration really coalesces around a single definition of what mission accomplished looks like here, what success looks like, then I think all of these things can be true at once.
And I should be clear, we have not heard the phrase mission accomplished, but we have heard this. This is the president over the last couple of hours and days.
We will not relent until the enemy is totally and decisively defeated. We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. We've struck over 5,000 targets to date, some of them very major targets. And we've left some of the most important targets for later. We could call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here. I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further.
Those last ones were just in the same speech, but there is a difference between an operation and a mission and a war.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question this has been a military success in the way that they've been doing this. The question is towards what end? To what end are you using the military? And the political objective here remains unclear. For, as you heard the president say, he's saying right now we could leave, right? We could say we've taken out the leader, we've taken out a lot of their Navy missile and other locations and sites, and now we could go ahead and say we did what we did because the real mission here was the degradation of the military threat from Iran.
Does the fact that they kept it mixed, gave this long list going in, make it easier for them? Meaning that their takeaway from the Bush years was don't go out and say a bunch of things that will be held against you later.
Well, I think that's exactly it. If you set a certain set of goals and you don't reach them, then you can be accused of not having done what you said you were going to do. If, on the other hand, you say, well, we've won, but we haven't quite won. We've hit a lot of major targets. There are more to hit. We want the Iranian people to rise up. We'll set the conditions. You rise up. You've created a scenario where you
even
can
rise up. What does that mean, right? What does that look like, and what would you support? No answer on any of those three questions.
Exactly right.
Okay, I want to show you how voters are receiving this. There's been recent polling, this time from Cornish. Has the Trump administration provided a clear explanation behind military action? We broke this out for you by party so you can see, even looking at independents, where I always look, that number at 71%. And surprisingly, Republicans at 75%. Yes, like I feel like that actually is a little lower than I thought it would be. And also, how much longer do you think the war in Iran will last? You got voters looking at the options of days, weeks, months, about a year, longer than that. People giving it months. They're not expecting this to be short. And honestly, this looks sort of like a pragmatic assessment.
Completely agree. That seems totally realistic.
For not military people, right? For like average Joes you're calling on the phone, they're expecting this. But are they expecting, and do you think they will support the economic pain that could come with it and some of the more complex things if we get tangled in the region?
Well, I think that's exactly what President Trump is trying to figure out himself. The reason you see these mixed messages is that the president is trying to assess how far can he go? How much pressure can he put on the Iranian government and the regime to ultimately collapse? Will the American people support a longer war? Will they accept higher gas gas prices. We saw him recently reduce sanctions on Russia in order to get more oil on the market.
Yeah, or even the casualties, right? He's sort of been like, war happens, but I don't know how much longer they think people are going to be down with that. You guys stay with me, because we are actually going to talk about some of these topics more. We have more experts coming in. Chad Gordon-Sondland, the former U.S. ambassador to the EU. So we wanted to talk about this because, again, when we looked at the polling, people were asked, how concerned are you military action against Iran will cause oil prices to go up? And we see independents in particular, but people across the board are very concerned about this. In the meantime, you hear the president saying this. Why would he make this decision when you could maybe just as easily leave Russia in the lurch and maybe convince them to back off of Ukraine?
Well, this is, Audie, this is a much bigger chess game than the transitory oil price increase. He has continually stayed friendly with Putin for a lot of reasons. Clobbering Putin really is not productive at all. He doesn't care if Trump clobbers him. What he's trying to do is he's trying to find an opening with Russia to figure out how to finally end this war in Ukraine and to bring Russia away from China closer to the United States. Just the same, the war in Iran is really not protecting Israel as much as it is dislodging China from a very cheap long-term oil supply and keeping China from getting super cozy with the Iranian Navy, which doesn't exist any longer.
Well, you brought up a lot of things, and we've got a lot of experts here who can help us out. So first, I want to hear your take on this, because there's a lot of moving parts. Ukraine is providing support, to take down drones. Russia's going to use the money it gets from the oil to bomb Ukraine. I don't understand the circle.
Well, and add to that, of course, that Iran has been supplying Russia with drones, so has been disrupting the Ukrainian battlefield further. I take Gordon's point about the desire to end the war more quickly, but unfortunately, I think the way that you're doing this is by throwing Ukraine and arguably the Europeans as well under the bus.
Here's Senator Ruben Gallego saying, Democrat, of course, Trump has got us into a war with no plan. Now, gas prices are soaring and American troops are in danger. His response, ease Russian oil sanctions while Russia helps Iran target our forces. End this. We had to blank it out because it's a morning show. Jamil.
Well, look, I think that's exactly right. I think that I respectfully disagree with the ambassador. I don't think Iran is about China. Iran is about Iran. Iran wants to get a nuclear program. They've been going after the U.S. for years. They've been killing American soldiers. This war is about Iran. It's not about China. And frankly, the gas price issue is one that's very problematic for the president here at home. He's got to do something about it. But the idea that we have the Russians put more oil into the market is crazy. We've got friends in Saudi Arabia. We have control, I guess, in theory, of the Venezuelan oil supply, right? We can produce more here. We have the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. There are a dozen things we could do before we allowed Russia to sell more oil into the international market. It makes no sense. I do think the ambassador is right that in part the president's trying to figure out how to get to a deal with Vladimir Putin. But you don't get to a deal with Vladimir Putin by easing up on him. You get to a deal with Vladimir Putin by putting more pressure on him and saying, hey, you want to supply intelligence to American forces, to the Iranians hitting American forces? I'm going to supply more intelligence and more weapons to Ukrainians to take out Russian forces. That's your pressure of Vladimir Putin, not by giving him a walk on oil supplies.
Okay, Jamil is really...
Well, thank God Donald Trump is the president, not Jamil, although I like Jamil.
Okay.
This is a very, very complex thing. And what Donald Trump is saying is, look, the oil is already afloat, basically. A lot of it is sitting on tankers. And he's turning knobs up and down, depending on the situation. Right now, he's using the oil to bring prices back in check. It's come back under $100 a barrel. This is a very transitory thing, but this war is critical for our long-term survival, for Israel's long-term survival, and frankly, for Europe's long-term survival.
Yes,
I can't tell you, Audie, how many times I was working on things that had to do with Iranian plots in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is why we're asking
daily.
all these questions.
It was almost daily.
Putin says we're ready to work with Europeans, but we need some signals from them that they're ready and willing to work with us and will ensure this.
Putin needs a missile in the Kremlin. That's the signal he needs.
I'm getting mixed signals from you in this conversation.
No, you're not getting mixed signals. I said Trump does not need to clobber Putin on television. That doesn't do anything. What Trump needs to do is increase his support of Ukraine quietly, continue to surge weapons into Ukraine, make Zelensky understand he has to be reasonable, even though I think Zelensky is completely in the right for not wanting to give up one.
You're getting some nods out of Jamil now.
One inch of Ukrainian territory.
Yeah.
But this is a very, very complicated process, and it's very easy to sit here and Monday morning quarterback. I would hate to be sitting in the Oval Office right now, and frankly, I'm glad the person sitting there really does know what he's doing.
Well, then let me turn over here, because I have two questions. I keep hearing the Iranian Navy is done. I also hear the Strait of Hormuz, not clear. So tell me defensively, what is happening?
Sure. I mean, there's two different pieces of this, right? The strait can be open, and also there can be an assessment by the ships that are trying to transit it that it is not safe.
The ships, the insurance industry,
exactly.
Most countries.
Exactly. Yeah. And so either side can declare that the strait is open, and I think at various points both sides have done exactly that.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean, though, that for exactly those reasons that we're going to see an uptick in oil flows in the coming weeks.
Yeah. A couple of things. One, if the president declares victory that the Strait of Hormuz is now open, then he's saying that basically the status antebellum is a win. We already knew that the Strait of Hormuz was open before this war started. Two, if the plan is to weaken sanctions on Russia, we know that the one point of leverage the U.S. has had over Russia in this entire conflict has been the sanctions and the economic pressure. If that is now weakened, either if the oil prices go up or if the sanctions are taken off, that helps the Russian economy, which helps their war machine, which does not help Ukraine in the long run. Third, we've seen President Trump in that press conference say that actually keeping the Strait of Hormuz open isn't really that beneficial to the U.S. It's actually helpful to China. He actually said it was helpful to China. So the notion that
confusing markets, which feel that it's very important for it to be open.
But then to say that I take the point, Ambassador, I really do, that there has been this axis of Russia, China, Ukraine, Iran, North Korea.
He's trolling China by saying
he's
that.
Not.
Yes, he is.
No, he's not. He's been very kind to China since Busan.
Listen, most of the docks and the ports that we destroyed are vital to China's oil supply. He's not doing anything to help
They're vital
China.
to international markets as well.
Yeah, also. And
I'm talking about the Iranian.
But to be clear, I also don't want to confuse people with 3D chess when we're in a very basic situation right now.
And both can be true. They can be vital to China, but it doesn't have to be about China.
Yes,
right?
and it also can be vital to more than China, which is what oil markets are. Chat is back. So we've got Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, is planning to speak in a few hours. And we have, I want to get your questions heading into this conversation and for the rest of the week, because there are a lot of them. We talked about oil, the Strait of Hormuz. We talked about public sentiment. Peter Baker of the New York Times tweeting, Americans skipped the rally around the president stage this time. And he notes that JFK gained 13 points after the Cuban Missile Crisis, 8 after bombing Hanoi, that George H.W. Bush got 18 during the Gulf War, Bush 8 after Saddam captured, Obama 11 after Osama bin Laden was killed. Trump has gained 0 since Iran. Can you talk about the difference historically? I mean, I should start with you, because you actually mentioned this earlier when you were talking about the Bush era sort of approach.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the challenge for President Trump is how's this playing at home? Can he survive within his own party, within the Republican Party, right? Will the MAGA base rebel against him? And he's clearly trying to deal with that at this House.
What are you seeing in the MAGA base? For me, I see like a Megyn Kelly or a Tucker, saying, resurfacing Charlie Kirk tweets about Iran and their disinterest in the U.S. going into foreign entanglements. How are you seeing the fighting?
Yeah, I mean, look, Tucker is irrelevant. I mean, Tucker is ridiculous. He supports Vladimir Putin. He talks about how Russia's got better grocery stores than America. He's platforming, neo-Nazis.
Yeah. But you say platforming because it's a massive audience. That's why I'm asking.
That's right. So, I mean, he's got an audience, right? Certainly. But the president's not trying to necessarily cater to that audience. He's looking at congressional Republicans. He's looking at the midterms and saying, how do I ensure this doesn't tank my support in the midterms and going forward so I can move my agenda forward?
But isn't that the J.D. Vance wing?
Well, I mean, you heard the president say during the press conference Monday that, the vice president was less enthusiastic, but still quite enthusiastic about this. Yes, there is a MAGA wing that is somewhat against this war, but what we've seen is that MAGA is not against war necessarily. They like targeted strikes. They like things that seem to appeal to protecting the American homeland. What they don't like is long-term foreign entanglements that really suck in the U.S. So as long as this is kept to a short-term excursion, as the president is saying, MAGA might be fine with this in the long term.
This doesn't happen in a vacuum. I feel like after Afghanistan in particular, abroad, people like officials in Iran think the U.S. public has a certain sensitivity to getting tangled up here, and that it is possible to sort of wait them out, that it is possible to make conditions difficult domestically. Like, they're aware of that as much as we are talking about local politics.
Absolutely, and I think they read that relatively correctly, in that, this becomes a game of time, and which can wait out the other when you're talking about oil prices, when you're talking about gas prices.
But you're taking on a lot of missiles in that time. I mean,
absolutely, but as a lot of people have discussed, for the Iranian regime, this really is an existential crisis, and they have every interest in ensuring that they extract enough pain from the United States that it makes it very hard for this administration or future administrations to wade back into this situation. And so they are, I believe, willing to probably take on more pain than would normally be attributed to them in an effort to reestablish some degree of balance in that relationship.
Last time when we were here, you brought up whether the president or Rubio had actually been explicit enough to the public about the reasons for going. But now that we're in, how are you feeling?
Well, I think on leadership, I give the president a 10. On communications and educating the American people, I give him a much lower grade. He is taking huge political risks, and he doesn't care. He understands the importance of this war. He's been talking about this problem long before he became president, and he is one of the few people who could prosecute this war with enough Teflon around him that he doesn't care where the polls are. He doesn't care temporarily where gas prices are. Now, if they're here 6 months or a year from now, he's going to care a lot. But he is willing to take the hits to get this done once and for all.
And we should say for Democrats, there's going to be a request from the Defense Department for supplemental funding. They're going to come back for more money. What are Democrats going to do then? They don't seem to have any kind of alternate path. They just have a criticism of how this path was taken.
Yeah, and we should know that there are Democrats that have also wanted to see this kind of military action taken against Iran. So they're kind of put in a tough space here because on the one hand, they don't want to seem weak on Iran. On the other hand, they don't want to be seen siding with the Trump administration if this were to go awry.
You're right. There's video of every single Democrat that has been criticizing this war talking about prosecuting such a war over the past several years. Every single Democrat.
I think the such a war is the question, right? Is this about military objectives, which the president has said are largely complete, or is this about complete surrender on the part of the regime? That is very different. And so
to your point, way back when, the video of the lone vote against the Iraq war, that aged better than it did in the moment. So you don't know how these things are going to look.
Well, I don't want to conflate the Iraq war.
I do,
with
but
the
I
Iran
want
war.
to say
even though
that
a lot of people out there don't know the difference.
These votes go on the record for a reason. We're so early in this process, and we've had a lot to talk about today. I appreciate you guys spending your time with us. Know that we've got more headlines coming up for you next.